Okay, so I know a lot of you are curious about how our brains actually tick.
Definitely. It's a fascinating area.
And we've been looking into some really interesting research, specifically split brain studies. What happens when the two sides of the brain can't talk directly?
Right. The work pioneered by people like Roger Sperry and Michael Gazzaniga, it's foundational stuff.
Exactly. So our mission here is basically to pull out the key takeaways from this research, understand what it tells us about how our, well, divided minds work.
Let's dive in. So, first off, what is split brain surgery? The sources point out it wasn't initially for research, right?
Yeah, that's key. It was a pretty drastic measure to control really severe, debilitating epilepsy.
They sever the corpus callosum, that big bundle of nerves connecting the left and right hemispheres, stop seizures from spreading across the whole brain.
But the side effect, the unintended consequence, was this incredible window into how each side operates, kind of independently.
Precisely, which leads to the different jobs each hemisphere does.
Okay, so this connection is cut. What are the main roles? People often say, like, left is logic, right is creativity. But it's more nuanced than that, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Generally speaking, the left hemisphere is heavily involved in language, speech, writing, understanding language, that sort of thing. Also, analytical thought.
Logic, sequences.
Right. And
Yeah.
the right hemisphere tends to excel more at spatial tasks, navigating, recognizing faces, processing emotions, and getting the overall gist of something. Holistic thinking.
Seeing the forest, not just the individual trees.
You got it.
So this is where those classic experiments come in. Sperry and Gazzaniga, they devised some really clever ways to test these separated hemispheres, didn't they? What did they find?
Oh, it was groundbreaking. So, because of how your eyes are wired, if you flash an image really quickly to someone's left visual field, only the right hemisphere sees it.
And vice versa for the right visual field going to the left hemisphere.
Exactly. So, they'd show a split brain patient, say, a picture of a key to their left visual field only.
So the right brain sees the key.
Right. The patient couldn't say what they saw because speech is usually controlled by the left brain, which didn't see the key.
Ah, okay.
But if you asked them to reach under a screen and pick out the object they saw with their left hand,
Which is controlled by the right brain.
they could pick out the key correctly. The left hand knew, even though the person couldn't verbally name it.
Wow. That really paints a picture. Like two separate streams of knowledge in one head. Did this show up in other behaviors?
Yeah, sometimes in strange ways. You might see one hand buttoning up a shirt while the other hand starts unbuttoning it, almost like conflicting intentions.
Seriously?
It happened. It really drove home the idea of lateralization, that different functions are strongly based in one hemisphere or the other. This gave solid proof.
So the brain isn't just like one unified machine. It has specialized parts. But does it stay that way after the surgery? Does the brain adapt at all?
Good question. The brain has amazing plasticity. It can reorganize. While that main highway, the corpus callosum, is cut, sometimes other smaller pathways might strengthen over time.
So some communication can still happen. Or compensation.
Some degree of compensation, yeah.
Hmm.
But the core findings about the distinct roles of each hemisphere largely hold true even years later.
Which brings up some really deep questions, doesn't it, about consciousness. If you have these two hemispheres acting semi-independently, does that mean two consciousnesses?
That's the million-dollar question, really. It's a huge philosophical and scientific puzzle. The left hemisphere often acts as the interpreter, creating a story or narrative to make sense of everything.
The one that does the talking.
Pretty much. But the research strongly suggests the right hemisphere has its own awareness, its own experiences, even if it can't articulate them in words. Whether that's a separate consciousness is, well, still debated.
And what about language specifically? How did all this refine what we know about how we process language?
It really cemented the left hemisphere's dominance for language in most people. While the right side might get some basic words or emotional tone, the heavy lifting of grammar, syntax, and actually producing speech. That's overwhelmingly a left brain function, as shown by these studies.
That makes sense. And thinking practically, does understanding this split help with things like, say, stroke rehabilitation?
Absolutely. If someone has damage to, for example, language areas in the left hemisphere, knowing the right hemisphere strengths in other areas like spatial or emotional processing.
Could help therapists design strategies.
Exactly. To encourage the healthy hemisphere to compensate, perhaps finding alternative ways to communicate or function, it provides a clearer map of the territory.
So from basic brain science to potential therapies, it sounds like this line of research had a massive impact.
Huge. It fundamentally shifted how neuroscience views brain organization and function. It opened up so many new questions we're still exploring.
Okay, so bringing it back to you listening, this split brain research, it's peeled back a layer on how our own brains work. This idea of two specialized hemispheres, connected but distinct.
Studying them when they're disconnected gave us these incredible insights into their separate jobs and, yeah, raised these profound questions about who we are, about consciousness and identity.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Just notice in your own experience, sometimes you might feel that pull between, say, a logical analysis and an intuitive gut feeling.
Or focusing on tiny details versus seeing the big picture. Perhaps, just perhaps, that's a little echo of your own two brain hemispheres working together. Or sometimes pulling in slightly different directions. Something to ponder.